Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The Harrison estate loomed against the morning sky, its gleaming windows reflecting the sunlight like 1,000 watchful eyes. Lila Stone stood at the wrought iron gates, her heart hammering beneath her threadbare blouse as she clutched her worn leather purse. The grandeur before her made her modest appearance seem even more pitiful by comparison, but desperation had driven her here, to the doorstep of a man who didn't even know she existed. 9 years, she thought, tracing the delicate chain of the locket hidden beneath her collar. 9 years of searching, of dreaming, of remembering eyes the color of stormy skies and hands that had once caressed her with reverent tenderness. The security guard examined her credentials with suspicious eyes. Miss Stone, for the housekeeping position, he confirmed, skepticism evident in his tone as he assessed her simple floral dress and scuffed shoes. Yes, Lila whispered, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. Mrs. Carver is expecting me. As the gate swung open, Lila fought the urge to turn and flee. The plan had seemed simple from a distance. Secure employment in Marcus Harrison's household, observe from afar, determine the right moment to reveal the truth. But standing on the threshold of his world, the enormity of what she was undertaking threatened to overwhelm her. For Theo, she reminded herself, squaring her shoulders as she approached the imposing entrance. For our son. Mrs. Carver, the head housekeeper, was a forbidding woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that seemed to catalog Lila's every flaw. She led Lila through the mansion with brisk efficiency, detailing duties and expectations in a monotone that suggested she'd given this tour more times than she cared to count. Mr. Harrison rarely interacts with household staff, Mrs. Carver explained as they traversed a corridor lined with priceless artwork. You will be invisible, efficient, and, above all, discreet. Any gossip about the family will result in immediate termination. Lila nodded, fighting to focus on the housekeeper's words while her senses drank in every detail of Marcus's world. The house was impeccably decorated but somehow cold, lacking the warmth that transformed a dwelling into a home. Crystal vases held perfect arrangements that looked as if no human hand had touched them. Everything gleamed with wealth and privilege, yet beneath the perfection, Lila sensed an emptiness that made her heart ache. You'll begin in the east wing, Mrs. Carver continued, leading her toward a sweeping staircase. Master Theo's quarters are strictly... A childish laugh interrupted her, bright and musical, echoing through the cavernous foyer. Lila froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the locket as a small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Time seemed to suspend as the boy paused in his descent, a toy airplane clutched in one hand. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that made Lila's heart clench with recognition. But it was his eyes, her eyes, the exact shade of emerald green that stared back at her from every mirror, that made breathing suddenly impossible. Theo, Mrs. Carver called, her tone shifting from professional to indulgent. Where is Miss Harper? You know you're not supposed to run in the house. The boy ignored the housekeeper completely, his gaze locked on Lila with an intensity that seemed impossible for one so young. The toy airplane slipped, forgotten, from his fingers, bouncing down several steps before coming to rest. Theo, Mrs. Carver repeated more firmly. This is Miss Stone, our new housekeeping staff. Now, where is your nanny? Mommy? The word, whispered with such wonder and certainty, echoed in the sudden silence like a thunderclap. Mrs. Carver stiffened, her mouth opening in shock as Theo flew down the remaining stairs, his small legs carrying him with reckless speed toward Lila. Mommy! He cried again, louder this time, his face transformed by joy as he launched himself the last few feet, directly into Lila's instinctively outstretched arms. The impact nearly knocked her backward, but some primal instinct kept her upright as small arms wrapped around her waist with desperate strength. The scent of him, soap, sunshine, and something uniquely him, filled her senses as she stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid this moment might shatter like the dream it surely was. You young man, Mrs. Carver sputtered, recovering her composure. That is entirely inappropriate. Miss Stone is not... What's happening here? The The deep voice cut through the chaos like a blade, resonant with authority and something darker, more dangerous. Lila didn't need to look up to know who had entered. Her body recognized him on some cellular level, responding with a rush of heat that brought color flooding to her cheeks. Marcus Harrison stood in the doorway to what appeared to be a study, his powerful frame outlined against mahogany panels. 9 years had refined him, added silver at his temples and lines of experience at the corners of his eyes. But they had done nothing to diminish the raw magnetism that had drawn her to him that fateful night so long ago. He wore authority like a second skin, his tailored suit emphasizing broad shoulders and narrow hips, his stance conveying absolute confidence in his domain. Yet it was his eyes, storm gray and penetrating, that held Lila mobile as he took in the scene before him. His son, clinging to a stranger as if she were his salvation. "Daddy," Theo said, his voice vibrating with excitement against Lila's stomach, where his face was pressed. "Look, I found her. I found Mommy." The blood drained from Marcus's face, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder, colder, as his gaze locked with Lila's. In that moment, she saw no recognition, no memory of the night that had bound them together, only suspicion and the beginning of anger. "Mrs. Carver," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "please take Theo to his rooms. Miss Harper will be relieved of her duties immediately for this lapse in supervision." "No," Theo cried, tightening his grip on Lila. "No, Daddy, she's my real mommy, like in your picture." A muscle ticked in Marcus's jaw as he approached, each step measured and deliberate. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming. The subtle scent of his cologne, the heat radiating from his body, the sheer physical power contained in his controlled movements. "Theo," he said, gentler now, as he knelt beside his son. "Miss Stone is new to our household. You've confused her with someone else." The boy shook his head with vehement denial. "No, she's the angel who saved you from the fire monster. I know her." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes then, a shadow of memory quickly suppressed before his expression hardened once more. He placed a hand on Theo's shoulder, firmly but kindly disengaging him from Lila. "Mrs. Carver will take you to the kitchen for a special treat while I speak with Miss Stone," he said, his tone brooking no argument despite its gentleness. "We'll discuss this later, buddy, I promise." Theo allowed himself to be led away, though he kept turning back to look at Lila with absolute certainty shining in his eyes, her eyes. "Don't leave, Mommy," he called as Mrs. Carver guided him toward a side door. "Promise you won't disappear again." When they were alone, the silence between Lila and Marcus grew thick with unspoken questions. He studied her with cold assessment, taking in her simple appearance with a gaze that missed nothing. "My office," he finally said, gesturing toward the study he'd emerged from. "Now." Lila followed, on legs that threatened to give way beneath her, her mind racing to adjust to this unexpected turn of events. How could Theo possibly recognize her? How could he know about the accident, the fire? She had come prepared to observe from a distance, to choose her moment carefully, not to be thrust into direct confrontation within minutes of arrival. The study was exactly what she would have expected of Marcus. Masculine and elegant, with leather-bound books lining shelves of dark wood and a massive desk that dominated the space. He closed the door behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded like a prison gate in the sudden silence. "Sit," he commanded, indicating a chair across from his desk. Lila complied, folding her trembling hands in her lap as Marcus circled to stand behind his desk, establishing the power dynamic with deliberate precision. He didn't sit, instead bracing his hands on the polished surface and leaning forward slightly, his posture reminiscent of a predator considering its prey. "I don't know what game you're playing," he began, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "but involving my son is unacceptable." "I'm not playing any game," Lila replied, summoning strength she didn't know she possessed. "I had no idea Theo would react that way. I've never met him before today." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Then how do you explain his reaction? A child doesn't call a complete stranger mommy without cause." "I can't explain it," she admitted, meeting his gaze directly, despite the way it made her heart race. "Children sometimes form instant attachments based on resemblances or coaching," Marcus interjected, his voice hardening. "Did someone put you up to this? Is this some kind of twisted scheme to extract money? Because I assure you, Miss Stone, you've chosen the wrong target." Indignation flared in Lila's chest, momentarily eclipsing her anxiety. "I'm here for a job, Mr. Harrison. a job that I desperately need. If I'd wanted to extract money, as you so charmingly put it, there are far more direct methods than applying to clean your toilets." Something like surprise flickered across Marcus's face at her spirited response. He straightened, studying her with renewed intensity, as if seeing her properly for the first time. "There's something familiar about you," he said after a moment, his tone shifting from accusation to puzzlement. "Have we met before?" The question struck Lila like a physical blow. 9 years of dreaming of this man, of carrying his child, of searching for him across cities and continents. And he asked if they'd met before, with the casual interest one might show a vaguely familiar face at a social gathering. "No," she lied, the word bitter on her tongue. "I think I would remember meeting someone like you, Mr. Harrison." A shadow of irritation crossed his face at her tone, but before he could respond, a soft knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Carver entered without waiting for permission, her expression carefully neutral. "Pardon the interruption, sir, but Theo is quite distressed. He's asking for Miss Stone." The housekeeper's disapproving glance made it clear what she thought of the situation. Marcus exhaled sharply through his nose, a muscle working in his jaw as he considered. "Fine," he said after a moment. "Miss Stone, you're reassigned, effective immediately. You'll work directly with Theo until we get to the bottom of this attachment. Consider it a probationary position." Lila's heart leapt at the thought of being close to her son, even as anxiety churned in her stomach at the intensity of Marcus's scrutiny. "Yes, sir," she managed, striving for a professional tone despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "And Miss Stone?" he added as she rose to follow Mrs. Carver, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers down her spine. "If I discover this is some kind of scheme, if you do anything to harm my son in any way, there is no corner of this earth where you could hide from me. Is that understood?" Belitho met his gaze steadily, allowing some of the truth she'd hidden to surface in her eyes. "I would never harm Theo," she said softly. "I would die first." Something in her tone, some absolute certainty that transcended the circumstances of their meeting, gave Marcus pause. For a heartbeat, something like recognition flickered in his storm-gray eyes, a connection that bypassed conscious thought and reached for deeper memory. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, leaving Marcus frowning slightly, as if troubled by his own reaction. With a curt nod, he dismissed her, turning back to his desk in a clear signal that their conversation was over. As Lila followed Mrs. Carver through the mansion toward the nursery wing, her mind raced with the implications of what had just occurred. She had come seeking employment, hoping for glimpses of the son she'd been forced to search for from afar, planning a careful revelation when the time was right. Instead, Theo had recognized her instantly, had called her mommy with absolute conviction, had mentioned both the accident and the photograph she hadn't known existed, and Marcus. Cold, suspicious Marcus, so different from the passionate man she remembered, had felt something, some echo of recognition that troubled him even as he dismissed it. The carefully constructed plan had shattered into chaos within minutes of her arrival, leaving Leela to navigate treacherous waters she hadn't anticipated. Yet, beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small flame of hope kindled in her chest. Her son had known her, had run to her with love shining in his eyes. Her eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, that moment of recognition was worth everything she had endured to reach it. As Mrs. Carver led her toward the sound of childish sobbing, Lila squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. She had survived 9 years of separation, of longing, of working 3 jobs while searching for the man who couldn't remember her face. She would survive whatever came next, whatever it took to reclaim the family that should have been hers all along. For Theo, for Marcus, for the love that had burned between them on a stormy night 9 years ago, a love that had created the beautiful boy who had somehow known her despite never having seen her face. For the family they were always meant to be. Chapter 2. Burning Questions. Theo's bedroom suite was a child's paradise, with walls painted to resemble an underwater kingdom and custom furnishings shaped like pirate ships and sea creatures. Toys worth more than Lila's entire apartment were arranged on custom shelves, while a small desk in the corner held educational materials suited for a child far beyond the average 8-year-old's abilities. All this wealth, this careful curation of a perfect childhood, and yet the boy himself sat huddled in the window seat, tears streaming down his cherubic face as he clutched a worn stuffed dolphin to his chest. "Theo," Mrs. Carver said with forced cheerfulness, "look who's come to see you." The transformation was instantaneous and heartbreaking. Theo's head snapped up, his tear-streaked face illumined by pure joy as he saw Lila standing in the doorway. Without hesitation, he launched himself across the room, colliding with her legs and wrapping his arms around her with a strength born of desperation. "You came back!" he cried, his voice muffled against her skirt. "I knew you wouldn't leave me again." Lila's heart shattered at the naked need in his voice. How could she explain that she had never left him willingly, that she had searched for him from the moment she discovered Marcus's identity, only to find him married to another woman, living on another continent? "Mrs. Carver," she said softly, "could we have a moment alone?" The housekeeper's lips thinned with disapproval, but she nodded curtly. "I'll be right outside the door," she said, the implicit warning clear in her tone. "Theo, remember what your father said about proper behavior." When the door closed behind her, Lila knelt to Theo's level, finally allowing herself to truly look at this miracle she had created. His features were a perfect blend of herself and Marcus. Her eyes and mouth, Marcus's strong jawline and aristocratic nose, her golden skin tone with Marcus's thick dark hair. "Theo," she began, unsure how to proceed without revealing too much too soon. "Why did you call me Mommy? We've never met before." The boy regarded her with surprising intensity for one so young. "Yes, we have," he insisted. "In my dreams. You sing to me when I'm scared of the fire monster." A chill raced down Lila's spine. The nightmares about fire had plagued her throughout her pregnancy and Theo's infancy, nightmares in which she relived pulling Marcus from the burning car over and over. Could such things be passed from mother to child? Could some bond transcend physical separation? "That's a very special dream," she said carefully. "But dreams aren't always the same as real life." Theo shook his head with the absolute certainty only children possess. "You're the lady from Daddy's secret picture," he stated. "The one he keeps in his special drawer that I'm not supposed to open. You saved him from the fire monster, and then you had to go away, but you promised you'd come back someday." Lila's breath caught in her throat. A picture? Marcus had a picture of her, and somehow Theo had found it, had recognized her from it, despite the fact that she'd never been formally photographed with Marcus. "Theo, sweetheart," she said, choosing her words with extreme care. "Your daddy and I need to talk about some grown-up things before we can explain everything to you. Can you be very brave and very patient while we sort things out?" The boy studied her face, seeming to search for something in her expression. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he nodded solemnly. "You won't leave again?" he asked, his small fingers clutching hers, with surprising strength. "I'll try my very best to stay," she promised, unable to offer more certainty in the face of Marcus's suspicion and the precariousness of her position. That seemed to satisfy him. Theo relaxed his death grip on her hand and even managed to smile. "I knew you'd find us," he whispered as if sharing a precious secret. "I told Daddy you would, but he said it was just pretend." Before Lila could respond, the door opened to reveal Marcus himself, his imposing frame filling the doorway as he surveyed the scene before him. His expression was carefully neutral, but Lila could sense the tension radiating from him, the barely leashed power of a man unused to situations beyond his control. "Theo," he said, his deep voice gentler than Lila had yet heard it, "it's time for your afternoon lessons. Miss Harper has been replaced with Mr. Grayson for today." "But, Daddy," Theo began, a note of panic entering his voice as he tightened his grip on Lila's hand. "No arguments," Marcus interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "Miss Stone and I need to have an important conversation. You'll see her at dinner." The promise of seeing her later was enough to placate Theo, who reluctantly released her hand. As he passed his father, he looked up with earnest eyes. "Don't be mad at Mommy," he said quietly. "It wasn't her fault the monsters made her go away." Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Confusion, frustration, and, beneath it all, a haunting uncertainty. He placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder, guiding him toward a stern-looking man waiting in the hallway. When they were alone, Marcus closed the door with deliberate care. The soft click was somehow more intimidating than a slam would have been. He remained near the entrance, as if unwilling to fully enter the space Lila occupied, and studied her with the calculating gaze of a man who had built an empire by assessing risks and opportunities. "You have exactly 5 minutes to explain yourself," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "And I suggest you make those minutes count, Miss Stone, because my patience is wearing dangerously thin." Lila rose from her kneeling position, determined to face him on equal footing, despite the difference in their heights. "I have nothing to explain," she replied, lifting her chin. "I came here seeking employment, nothing more." Theo's reaction was as surprising to me as it was to you. "Surprising?" Marcus's laugh held no humor. "My son, who has never so much as spoken to strangers without prompting, throws himself at you and calls you Mommy. He references a photograph I keep in a locked drawer in my private study. He mentions details about an accident that no one outside my immediate circle knows about. And you expect me to believe this is all coincidence?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his presence suddenly overwhelming in its proximity. Lila held her ground despite the urge to step back, to create distance between herself and the magnetic pull of his body. "Who are you, really?" he demanded, close enough now that she could see the flecks of silver in his storm-gray eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his tall frame. "What do you want from me? From my son?" The questions hung between them, charged with tension that transcended mere suspicion. This close, Lila could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight furrow between his brows that spoke of habitual concentration. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and citrus, the same scent she'd committed to memory 9 years ago. And, beneath it, the unique male essence that had haunted her dreams for 9 long years. "My name is Lila Stone," she answered, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the havoc his proximity wreaked on her senses. "I'm a former nursing student who needed employment. That's all." "Former nursing student," Marcus repeated, something shifting in his expression. He circled her slowly, his gaze a tangible weight on her skin. Strange coincidence. "The accident report mentioned that the person who pulled me from the wreckage had medical training. Applied a tourniquet to my arm before disappearing into the night." Lila's heart stuttered in her chest. He remembered that much, at least. Remembered being saved, if not the face of the woman who had saved him. "Many people have medical training," she replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze despite the way it made her pulse race. "It's hardly unique to me." "Perhaps not," he conceded, completing his circle to stand before her once more. But combined with my son's reaction, with the specific details he mentioned, he trailed off, studying her face with uncomfortable intensity. "There's something about you, Miss Stone. Something that feels familiar." The admission, reluctant though it was, sent hope fluttering in Lila's chest. She fought to keep it from showing on her face, aware that revealing too much too soon could destroy any chance of being believed. "Mr. Harrison," she said carefully, "I understand your suspicion. In your position, I would feel the same. But I assure you, I mean no harm to you or your son." Marcus's expression hardened once more. "Words are cheap, Miss Stone. Actions speak louder." "Then judge me by my actions," she challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. "Let me work with Theo, as you suggested. Observe me. If you see anything that concerns you, dismiss me immediately. I'll leave without protest." For a long moment Marcus said nothing, his expression unreadable as he considered her proposition. Lila held her breath, knowing everything, her future, her relationship with her son, her chance to reclaim the love she'd lost, hung on his decision. "Very well," he finally said, his tone clipped. "You'll be assigned quarters in the family wing, near Theo's rooms. Mrs. Carver will provide appropriate clothing and explain your duties. You will be with Theo during all waking hours, when he's not in lessons, or with me. You will be monitored at all times, and you will report directly to me each evening regarding his well-being and activities." The terms were both more generous and more restrictive than Lila had dared hope for. Living in the family wing would place her in proximity to both Theo and Marcus, allowing opportunities to build relationships with both. But the constant monitoring, the nightly reports, they spoke of a distrust that would be difficult to overcome. "I accept," she said simply. Marcus nodded once, brisk and businesslike, as if they'd just concluded a minor corporate negotiation rather than arranged the care of his only child. One more thing, he added, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers down Lila's spine. My son believes you're his mother. I expect you to correct that misapprehension at the earliest opportunity. The demand, delivered with cold authority, struck Lila like a physical blow. Deny her own child? Lie to the boy who had somehow recognized her across time and space? And if he doesn't believe me? She asked, her voice barely audible. Something dangerous flickered in Marcus's eyes. Then you will be creative, Miss Stone, because the alternative, allowing him to continue in this delusion, is unacceptable. He moved toward the door, clearly considering the conversation concluded, but Lila found herself unable to let him leave without asking the question that burned in her throat. Mr. Harrison, she called softly, the picture Theo mentioned, the one in your private drawer. May I ask what it is? Marcus paused with his hand on the doorknob, his back to her, shoulders suddenly tense beneath his impeccable suit. For a moment, she thought he might ignore the question entirely. A photograph taken outside the hospital after my accident, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. I'm in the foreground. In the background, partly obscured, is a woman walking away. The picture was taken by a reporter hoping for a statement about the crash. He half-turned, his profile sharp against the afternoon light streaming through the windows. I've kept it because something about it, he paused, seeming to choose his words with unusual care. Something about it feels important, though I couldn't tell you why. With that cryptic statement hanging in the air between them, Marcus left, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Alone in Theo's cheerful bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of the life her son had lived without her, Lila sank onto the window seat and allowed herself a moment of pure, overwhelming emotion. Tears she'd held back through the entire confrontation spilled silently down her cheeks. Tears of joy at finding her son, of pain at Marcus's cold suspicion, of hope that perhaps, somewhere deep in his subconscious, he remembered her after all. The photograph was the key. Somehow, Theo had found it, had recognized her in it, despite never having seen her face except in his mysterious dreams. And Marcus, pragmatic, logical Marcus, had kept it all these years, drawn to it by some instinct he couldn't explain away with his rational mind. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a reminder of another storm 9 years ago that had changed the course of all their lives. As thunder rumbled in the distance, Lila wiped away her tears and squared her shoulders, determination replacing uncertainty. She had found them, her son, who had somehow recognized her across time and distance, and Marcus, who carried echoes of their connection, even if he couldn't access the memories directly. Now she needed to find a way to bridge the gap between past and present, to rebuild the family that should have been hers all along. As rain began to patter against the windows, Lila made a silent promise to Theo, to Marcus, to herself. No matter what obstacles Marcus's suspicion or his protective instincts threw in her path, she would find a way to restore what had been lost, to reclaim the love that had burned between them during that stormy night 9 years ago, even if she had to make him fall in love with her all over again. The storm was coming, but this time she wouldn't disappear into the night. This time, she would stand firm against whatever forces tried to separate them. This time, she would fight for her family with everything she had. Chapter 3. The Memory Awakens. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke as night descended on the Harrison estate. Rain lashed against windows like desperate fingers seeking entry, while lightning transformed the manicured grounds into a stark tableau of silver and shadow. Inside, Lila had just finished helping Theo with his evening routine, marveling at how naturally they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm despite having only met that morning. "Will you tell me a bedtime story?" Theo asked, his green eyes mirror images of her own, wide with hope as she tucked his blankets around him. "About the night you saved Daddy from the fire monster." Lila hesitated, torn between Marcus's explicit instruction to correct Theo's misapprehension and her overwhelming desire to share their true history with her son. "How about a different story tonight?" she suggested gently. A tremendous crash of thunder shook the mansion, rattling windows and cutting the lights, plunging the room into sudden darkness. Theo's terrified scream pierced the shadows as he bolted upright, arms reaching blindly for Lila. "The fire monster!" he cried, his small body trembling violently against her as she gathered him close. "He's coming back for Daddy. He's angry because you saved him." "Shh, sweetheart," Lila murmured, her heart breaking at his terror. She rocked him gently, an instinctive motion she'd dreamed of for 9 years. "It's just thunder. Nothing can hurt you here. I promise." Theo clung to her, his tears warm against her skin. "Promise," he whispered against her neck. "I promise." She kissed his forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair. "You know what helps me when I'm scared of storms?" Songs. Without waiting for a response, Lila began to sing softly. A lullaby her own mother had sung to her. One she had hummed to her pregnant belly each night, when her only connection to her child had been the flutter of movement beneath her heart. Theo's trembling gradually subsided as her voice filled the darkness, his breathing slowing as he nestled against her. Lila was so focused on comforting him that she didn't notice the bedroom door opening until lamplight spilled across the floor, illuminating Marcus's imposing silhouette. "Theo?" His deep voice carried concern as he approached, the emergency lamp in his hand casting dramatic shadows across his carved features. "Are you all right, buddy?" "Mommy's singing made the monsters go away," Theo mumbled sleepily, his eyes already heavy-lidded with approaching slumber. Marcus's gaze lifted to Lila's face, something unreadable flickering in his expression as he observed her cradling his son. For a moment, the three of them existed in a perfect tableau, a family united by blood, if not by memory. "That song," Marcus said slowly, his brow furrowing. "I've heard it before." Lila's heart stuttered in her chest. "It's just an old lullaby," she replied, her voice barely audible above the rain. Marcus stepped closer, placing the lamp on the bedside table. The warm light revealed Theo now sleeping peacefully against Lila's shoulder, his small face relaxed in complete trust. "Let me help you," Marcus murmured, reaching to take Theo from her arms. As their hands brushed during the transfer, a jolt of electricity coursed between them, so powerful that Marcus faltered, nearly dropping their son. His eyes snapped to Lila's, wide with confusion and something deeper, more primal. "What was that?" he whispered. The question weighted with meanings beyond the physical sensation they'd shared. Before Lila could respond, another thunderclap shook the mansion, followed immediately by a blinding flash of lightning that illuminated the room like midday. In that stark, frozen moment, something changed in Marcus's expression. A flash of recognition quickly submerged beneath his careful control. After settling Theo, Marcus gestured for Lila to follow him into the adjoining sitting room, closing the bedroom door softly behind them. The emergency lighting cast his face in dramatic relief, highlighting the tension in his jaw, the troubled furrow between his brows. "Who are you?" he asked again. But the question lacked the earlier suspicion, replaced by genuine bewilderment. "Why does everything about you feel so familiar? Why does my son respond to you as if he's known you his entire life?" Lila took a deep breath, knowing this moment could determine everything that followed. "Perhaps," she suggested carefully, "you should show me the photograph Theo mentioned, the one in your private drawer." Marcus studied her face for a long, tense moment, before nodding once, decisively. "Wait here." He returned minutes later, a slightly faded photograph held carefully between his fingers. Without a word, he handed it to Lila, his eyes never leaving her face as she examined it. The image showed Marcus outside a hospital, his arm in a sling, smiling tightly for the camera, despite obvious pain and exhaustion. But it was the background that caught Lila's breath. Herself, half turned away, her profile unmistakable though her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her scrubs clearly visible beneath a light jacket. "This is all I have," Marcus said quietly. "This, and dreams that make no sense. Fragments I can't piece together. Candlelight, the scent of lavender, green eyes watching me with such—" He trailed off, shaking his head in frustration. Another crash of thunder directly overhead made the windows rattle violently. Marcus winced, his hand going instinctively to his temple, eyes closing momentarily as if in pain. "Marcus?" Lila stepped closer, concern overriding caution. "Are you all right?" His eyes snapped open at her use of his first name, something dangerous and electric passing between them. "The accident happened during a storm," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "like this one, sometimes, when thunder—" Without warning, Marcus staggered, knees buckling as he clutched his head. Lila moved without thinking, her nursing instincts taking over as she guided him to a nearby sofa, her hands steady and sure on his shoulders. "Breathe," she instructed, kneeling before him. Slow, deep breaths. Focus on my voice. His eyes locked with hers, wide and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen since that night 9 years ago. You, he whispered, fingers reaching to brush her cheek with trembling uncertainty. It was you. Lila's heart stopped, then lurched painfully back into rhythm. What do you remember? She asked, barely daring to hope. Flames, he murmured, his gaze unfocused, seeing something beyond the present moment. Pain, rain, soaking through my clothes, and you, pulling me from the wreckage. Your voice, ordering me to stay conscious, to focus on your eyes. His fingers traced her features as if memorizing them by touch, sending shivers of awareness cascading through Lila's body. You took me somewhere. Not the hospital, a small house filled with books and plants. My cottage, Lila confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. The storm had washed out the bridge to town. I couldn't get you to a hospital until morning. Marcus's eyes cleared, focusing on her face with new intensity. You cared for me through the night, cleaned my wounds, gave me your bed. Heat flooded Lila's cheeks at the memory of what had followed, how professional distance had dissolved into desperate need, how they had come together with the storm raging around them, finding in each other something neither had known they were seeking. Yes, she whispered, unable to elaborate further, with her heart lodged firmly in her throat. Another flash of lightning, another thunderclap, and suddenly Marcus surged forward, his hands cradling her face with desperate gentleness. We made love, he said hoarsely, all night, like the world was ending, like nothing existed beyond that room, that moment. Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks, joy and relief mingling into overwhelming emotion. You remember? Not everything, he admitted, thumbs brushing away her tears. Fragments only, but enough to know that Theo was right. You're not a stranger. You're his mother, Lila finished, the truth finally spoken aloud between them. Our son Marcus, the child we created that night. For a heartbeat, doubt flickered across his face, the businessman reasserting itself over the man who had begun to remember. That's impossible to verify without a DNA test. Lila nodded. I would expect nothing less. I've spent 9 years searching for you, for him. I have nothing to hide. Marcus released her face, running a hand through his hair as he processed this revelation. If what you're saying is true, why didn't you find me sooner? Why wait 9 years? The question held no accusation, only genuine confusion. Lila sank onto the sofa beside him, suddenly exhausted by the weight of secrets too long carried alone. I tried, she explained, her voice soft with remembered pain. You left before dawn, leaving only a thank you note, no name, no contact information. When I discovered I was pregnant weeks later, I had nothing to go on but a description and the general direction your car had been heading. She twisted her hands in her lap, reliving the desperate search that had consumed her early pregnancy. By the time I tracked down your identity through hospital records, you had married Sophia and moved to Europe. The society pages announced you were expecting a child with your new wife. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. You thought I'd moved on, that I had another family. What was I supposed to think? Lila asked, 9 years of pain bleeding into her voice. You couldn't remember me. You had a pregnant wife. I was a nursing student, barely making ends meet. What right did I have to upend your life? Every right, Marcus said fiercely, capturing her hands in his. He's your son. Our son. The simple acknowledgement, spoken with such certainty, broke something open inside Lila, a dam of emotion she'd held back for 9 long years. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks as Marcus pulled her against his chest, his arms encircling her with protective strength. I'm so sorry, he murmured against her hair. So sorry I couldn't remember, that I doubted you, that you faced all this alone. Outside, the storm began to abate, thunder receding into the distance as rain gentled against the windows. Inside, Lila and Marcus remained entwined, the past and present merging into a new reality neither had dared hope for. What happens now? Lila finally asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Marcus pulled back slightly, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. In his eyes, she saw determination, wonder, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. Now, he said softly, we take this one step at a time, a DNA test for formality's sake, and then Then we figure out how to be a family, the family we should have been all along." His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there with unmistakable intent. "But first," he murmured, his voice dropping to a register that sent heat spiraling through her body, "I think I need to remember more clearly exactly what happened that night." The invitation in his words was unmistakable, sending a shiver of anticipation down Lila's spine. 9 years of longing, of dreaming of this man, crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. Without hesitation, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The first brush of his lips against hers was tentative, questioning, so different from the desperate passion they had shared during the storm. But as Lila responded, parting her lips in silent invitation, something ignited between them. Recognition on a cellular level that transcended conscious memory. Marcus groaned, deepening the kiss as his hands tangled in her hair, angling her head to grant him better access. Lila melted against him, her body remembering what his mind had forgotten. The perfect fit of his mouth against hers. The intoxicating taste that was uniquely him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Marcus rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if overwhelmed by sensation. "I may not remember everything," he whispered, "but my body remembers you, Lila Stone. Every touch, every taste, every sound you make when pleasure overtakes you." He brushed his lips against hers once more, a feather-light touch that promised so much more. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured against her mouth. "Help me remember everything I've lost." The invitation, spoken with such raw vulnerability, touched something deep within Lila's soul. This wasn't just about physical desire, though that burned between them with undeniable heat. This was about healing, about reconnecting, about building a bridge between the past they had shared and the future they might create together. "Yes," she whispered, her heart soaring with newfound hope. "Yes to tonight. Yes to remembering. Yes to everything." As Marcus drew her to her feet, leading her toward his chambers with fingers intertwined with hers, Lila felt the final pieces of her fractured world beginning to heal. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were explanations to be made, adjustments to navigate, a life to rebuild from fragments too long separated. But for tonight, for this moment, they had found each other across time and circumstance. Theo slept peacefully in his room, secure in the knowledge his mother had finally returned. And Marcus, her Marcus, was beginning to remember what his heart had never truly extinct. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake the promise of a new beginning for all of them. Chapter 4. Dangerous Desire. Marcus's private suite was a revelation. Not the cold, impersonal space Lila had expected, but a sanctuary of understated luxury. Warm woods, leather-bound books, and subtle lighting created an atmosphere both masculine and intimate. The wall of windows overlooking the now calming storm gave the impression of being suspended between earth and sky. Yet Lila noticed none of this in detail, her senses overwhelmed by Marcus's presence as he led her through the sitting room toward his bedroom. Their fingers remained intertwined, the simple contact sending electric currents up her arm with each step. At the threshold of his bedroom, Marcus paused, turning to face her with an expression so vulnerable it stole her breath. "I need you to understand," he said softly, "that this isn't about physical release for me. This is about remembering us." The distinction, so tenderly expressed, brought tears to Lila's eyes. "I know," she whispered, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. Marcus captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers coursing through her body. "I remember fragments," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "Your skin in candlelight, the sound of your laughter, how you trembled when I touched you here." His fingers brushed the sensitive spot beneath her ear, making her gasp softly. "And here?" His hand skimmed down her side to rest at the curve of her waist. "Help me remember the rest," he murmured, his gray eyes dark with desire and something deeper, more profound. In answer, Lila stretched up on her toes, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began with gentle invitation and quickly blazed into consuming hunger. Marcus responded instantly, his arms encircling her waist to lift her against him, eliminating any space between their bodies as he deepened the kiss with passionate intensity. They moved into the bedroom without breaking contact, a dance of desire and rediscovery that left them breathless. When the backs of Lila's knees met the edge of his massive bed, Marcus finally pulled back, his breathing ragged as he gazed down at her with wonder. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered," he said, his thumbs tracing her flushed cheekbones with reverence. Lila's heart swelled at the admission, at the knowledge that somewhere in his subconscious he had carried her image all these years. "Show me," she whispered, a challenge and a plea in equal measure. "Show me what you remember." Something dangerous and thrilling flashed in Marcus's eyes at her words. With deliberate slowness, he began unbuttoning her simple blouse, each newly revealed inch of skin receiving its own dedicated attention from his fingers, his lips, his tongue. By the time the garment slipped from her shoulders, Lila was trembling with need, her body remembering his touch, even across 9 years of separation. "I remember this," Marcus murmured against the curve of her throat, his hand spanning her waist with possessive heat. "How responsive you are. How every touch makes you shiver." As if to prove his point, he traced the lace edge of her bra with one finger, smiling against her skin when she gasped. "And I remember this sound," he continued, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated through her very bones. "The little catch in your breath when I touch you just right." Lila's fingers tangled in his thick hair, holding him to her as sensations cascaded through her body. "What else?" she encouraged breathlessly. "What else do you remember?" In response, Marcus lifted her onto the bed with effortless strength, following her down until his weight pressed her deliciously into the mattress. "I remember how perfectly we fit together," he said, his eyes never leaving hers as he settled between her thighs. "As if you were made for me, as if we were two halves of the same soul." The words, achingly romantic from a man who dealt primarily in facts and figures, brought fresh tears to Lila's eyes. "We created a child that night," she reminded him softly, her hands framing his beloved face. "A perfect blend of both of us." Something shifted in Marcus's expression at the mention of Theo. Wonder, possessiveness, and a fierce protectiveness that made Lila's heart swell with love. "Our son," he said, testing the words as if tasting their meaning for the first time. "The best of both of us." He lowered his head, capturing her mouth in a kiss of such tender passion that Lila felt it resonate in the very center of her being. Everything that had been building between them, the attraction, the connection, the shared history they were only beginning to reconstruct, crystallized into this perfect moment of communion. Their remaining clothes fell away under eager hands, each new expanse of skin explored with reverent attention. Marcus worshipped Lila's body with the dedicated focus he brought to everything important in his life, relearning her most sensitive places, rediscovering the touches that made her gasp his name into the darkness. When he finally joined their bodies, moving within her with exquisite control, Lila felt the last pieces of her fragmented heart click into place. This perfect union, this sense of completion, was what she had been missing for 9 long years. Not just physical pleasure, though that built between them with every measured thrust, but the soul-deep connection that had haunted both their dreams. "Lila," Marcus breathed against her lips, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control. "Look at me. I need to see your eyes." She obeyed, locking her gaze with his as they moved together, as pleasure built between them like a gathering storm. In his eyes, she saw recognition dawning, memories breaking through the barriers of amnesia, of time, of circumstance. "I remember," he gasped, his rhythm faltering as emotion overwhelmed him. "I remember everything. The storm, your cottage, how you sang to me when pain threatened to drag me under." Tears spilled from Lila's eyes as she clutched him closer, her body and heart open to him completely. "Yes," she encouraged, her lips finding his in desperate affirmation. "Yes, my love." The endearment, unplanned but absolutely true, seemed to break the last of Marcus's restraint. With a groan that vibrated through both their bodies, he increased his pace, driving them both toward the pinnacle of pleasure with single-minded determination. When release finally claimed them, it was with a synchronicity that transcended physical connection. Two souls recognizing each other across time and circumstance, falling together, catching each other, becoming whole in a burst of sensation that left them both breathless and trembling in the aftermath. They remained entwined as their breathing gradually slowed, neither willing to relinquish the connection they had rediscovered. Marcus's weight pressed Lila into the mattress, a delicious anchor to reality as her mind and heart adjusted to the seismic shift that had occurred between them. "It was real," Marcus finally murmured, his lips brushing her temple as he rolled to his side, keeping her firmly in the circle of his arms. The dreams, the fragments, the sense of missing something crucial. "It was you, Lila. It was always you. Always." "Yeah, I know." Lila nestled closer, her head finding its natural place in the hollow of his shoulder, her hand resting over his steadying heartbeat. "I never stopped looking for you," she confessed. "Even when I thought you had moved on, had built a life without me, something in my heart wouldn't let me give up." Marcus's arms tightened around her convulsively. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into her hair, "for not remembering, for not finding you first, for all the years we lost." "Not lost," Lila corrected gently, lifting her head to meet his troubled gaze. "Just delayed. We're here now. We have Theo. We have each other. Everything else is just details." A smile touched Marcus's lips, transforming his face from its habitual seriousness into something breathtakingly beautiful. "Always the optimist," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender fingers. "It's one of the things I love about you." The casual admission of love, spoken as if it were an established fact rather than a new revelation, made Lila's heart skip. "You love me?" she asked softly, needing to hear the words directly, unambiguously. Marcus's expression turned serious once more, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "I loved you that night 9 years ago," he said simply. "I loved you in my dreams, even when I couldn't remember your face. And I love you now, Lila Stone, with a certainty that defies rational explanation." The declaration, spoken with such absolute conviction, washed away the last of Lila's doubts. About herself, about their future, about his ability to fully reclaim what trauma had stolen from them. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never stopped, not for a single day." Marcus pulled her closer, claiming her mouth in a kiss that promised forever, even as it rekindled the desire that simmered constantly between them. As his hands began their expert exploration once more, as pleasure built anew within Lila's responsive body, a sense of perfect rightness settled over her. They had found each other across time and circumstance, had created a beautiful child together, had overcome trauma and separation to reach this moment of perfect communion, whatever challenges lay ahead, and Lila had no illusions that their path would be entirely smooth. They would face them together, strengthened by a bond that had withstood 9 years of absence. As dawn broke over the Harrison estate, painting the sky in delicate hues of pink and gold, Lila and Marcus finally surrendered to exhaustion, their bodies pleasantly sated, their hearts full of newfound hope. They slept entwined, each unwilling to relinquish contact with the other, even in slumber, as if afraid the miracle they had rediscovered might dissolve with the morning light. Neither stirred when the bedroom door cracked open hours later, revealing Theo's curious face peeping through the gap. The boy observed his parents sleeping peacefully together, a smile of absolute satisfaction spreading across his features before he quietly closed the door and tiptoed away. Some knowledge, after all, transcended rational explanation. Theo Harrison had always known his mother would find them eventually. Now, at last, his family was complete. Chapter 5. The Truth Revealed. Morning sunlight streamed through Marcus's bedroom windows, casting golden patterns across rumpled sheets and entwined bodies. Lila stirred first, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings until memories of the night flooded back, Marcus remembering her, their passionate reunion. Declarations of love exchanged in breathless whispers. Her movement roused Marcus, who tightened his arm around her waist before his eyes even opened, as if afraid she might disappear. When his storm-gray eyes finally met hers, the warmth in them made her heart skip. "I thought I might have dreamed you," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep as he traced her features with gentle fingers. "That I'd wake up and find myself alone again." Lila turned to press a kiss to his palm. "No more dreams," she promised. "Just reality. Us." His smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and heartache. "Us?" he repeated, the simple word laden with meaning. And Theo, at the mention of their son, shared purpose crystallized between them. They needed to confirm what their hearts already knew, to make their strange, miraculous reunion official with the proof the world would demand. The DNA test, Lila said, uncertainty flickering across her face. You still want it? Marcus sat up, drawing her with him so they faced each other in the morning light. Not for me, he assured her, taking both her hands in his. I know the truth. But for Theo's sake, for legal protection, for silencing any potential questions or gossip, yes, we need it. His practicality, his protective instinct toward both her and their son, made Lila love him even more. Of course, she agreed. No shadows, no doubts, just clarity for our future. With newfound purpose, they prepared to face the day together. Lila borrowed clothes from Marcus's closet, the oversized shirt and hastily rolled pants, drawing a heated look from him that promised further exploration later. They decided Lila would return to her quarters to change properly, while Marcus arranged for the DNA test and prepared Theo for the news that would change everything. I'll send Dr. Bennett to your room in an hour, Marcus said as they stood at his bedroom door, reluctant to part even briefly. He's discreet and efficient. We'll have results by afternoon. So soon? Lila hadn't expected such speed. Marcus's smile held a hint of his usual commanding confidence. Being CEO has certain advantages. Bennett owes me several favors. As Lila turned to leave, Marcus pulled her back for one more kiss, tender yet possessive. A promise for their future. This time, he whispered against her lips, I won't forget. Dr. Bennett proved to be a distinguished older gentleman with kind eyes and professional detachment. He asked no questions as he collected DNA samples from Lila, simply offering a warm smile that suggested he understood more than anyone had told him. Mr. Harrison has requested priority processing, he explained as he packed away the samples. Results should be available by 3 this afternoon. The hours that followed passed with excruciating slowness. Lila busied herself with the duties assigned to her as Theo's caretaker, though the role had transformed overnight from a means of access to her son into something altogether different. Theo seemed to sense the change in the air, watching her with those perceptive green eyes. Her eyes, as if waiting for confirmation of what he had somehow always known. At precisely 3 o'clock, Marcus summoned Lila to his study. He stood by the window when she entered, his tall frame outlined against the afternoon sunlight, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. When he turned, his expression was unreadable. Marcus? She asked, heart suddenly pounding with inexplicable fear. What is it? In answer, he crossed the room in 3 long strides and gathered her into his arms, lifting her clear off her feet in an embrace, installing that stole her breath. 99.98% probability, he murmured against her hair. You are, without question, Theo's biological mother. Joy exploded through Lila like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Tears spilled down her cheeks as Marcus set her gently on her feet, his thumbs brushing the moisture away with infinite tenderness. I never doubted it, he confessed, pressing his forehead to hers. Not really. Not after last night. But having it confirmed, having irrefutable proof, he drew a shaky breath. It makes everything real. You're real. What we have is real. Lila wound her arms around his neck, happiness too great for words bubbling up inside her. After 9 years of searching, of hoping against hope, of dreaming of this moment, it had finally arrived. Scientific confirmation of what her heart had always known. What do we tell Theo? She asked, when she could finally speak past the emotion clogging her throat. The truth, Marcus said without hesitation. A simplified version, appropriate for his age, but the truth nonetheless. He deserves that much. He's known all along, somehow. The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction that honesty was the only path forward, reassured Lila more than anything else could have. This was the man she had fallen in love with during that stormy night. Compassionate, direct, uncompromising in his integrity. When? She asked simply. Now, Marcus decided, his fingers intertwining with hers. No more waiting, no more secrets. It's time for our family to truly begin. Together they went to find their son, hands clasped like teenagers on a first date, hearts pounding with nervous anticipation. They found Theo in the garden, carefully examining a caterpillar on a leaf with the focused attention unique to children. Theo, Marcus called, his voice gentler than Lila had ever heard it. We need to talk to you, buddy. Something important." The boy looked up, his gaze immediately taking in their joined hands, a smile of pure satisfaction spreading across his face. Without a word, he abandoned his caterpillar and ran to them, throwing one arm around each of their legs in a three-way hug that nearly toppled them all. "You remembered," he said simply, looking up at his father with absolute certainty. "You remembered Mommy." Marcus knelt to Theo's level, bringing himself eye to eye with his son. "Yes," he confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "I remembered, and we've confirmed what you somehow knew all along. Lila is your mother, your real mother." Theo rolled his eyes in a gesture so reminiscent of Lila that Marcus couldn't help laughing. "I told you," the boy said, with the exaggerated patience of a child explaining something obvious to an adult. "I told you she was my real mommy." "I know you did," Lila agreed, kneeling beside Marcus to complete their small circle. "And now we need to explain how that happened, why I haven't been with you until now." Theo's expression turned serious, his small brow furrowing in concentration. "Because Daddy forgot you," he said with surprising insight. "The monsters made him forget after the fire." Marcus and Lila exchanged amazed glances at their son's perception. "That's partly right," Marcus explained gently. "I had an accident, the fire you mentioned, and Lila saved me, but I hurt my head and couldn't remember her afterward. And I didn't know how to find your father when I discovered I was going to have you," Lila continued softly. "By the time I learned who he was, he had moved far away. But you found us now," Theo stated, his absolute certainty both touching and humbling. "Yes, sweetheart, I found you." Tears blurred Lila's vision as Theo reached for her, small arms wrapping around her neck with complete trust and acceptance. Over their son's dark head, her eyes met Marcus's, finding them suspiciously bright with emotion. Without words, they shared a moment of perfect understanding, of gratitude for this miracle, of determination to make up for lost time. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Theo asked as he pulled back, his expression suddenly anxious. "You won't go away again?" "Never again," Lila promised fervently, her hand finding Marcus's in silent solidarity. "We're a family now, you, me, and your father. Nothing will separate us again." Theo considered this with the gravity only children can bring to momentous decisions. "Good," he finally declared with a definitive nod, "because I already told Mr. Langley you're my real mommy, and he would be very upset if I had to tell him I was wrong." The simple statement, so childlike in its logic, yet so profound in its acceptance, broke the tension completely. Marcus laughed, the sound freer and more joyous than Lila had yet heard from him, and she couldn't help joining in, happiness bubbling up like a spring too long suppressed. Theo giggled along, though clearly not understanding why his statement was funny, simply delighted to be part of this newfound joy. As their laughter subsided, Marcus gathered both Lila and Theo into his arms, creating a circle of connection that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. "There's something else you should know, buddy," Marcus said, his voice vibrating against Lila's cheek where it pressed against his chest. "I love your mother very much. I think I've loved her since the moment she pulled me from that burning car, even if I couldn't remember her face." The declaration, spoken so openly before their son, filled Lila's heart to overflowing. "And I love your father," she added softly. "I never stopped. Not for a single day." Theo wiggled slightly in their embrace, looking up with a smile of pure satisfaction. "I know," he said simply. "That's why you found each other again. Because love is stronger than monsters." Out of the mouths of babes, Lila thought, meeting Marcus's gaze over their son's head. Love was indeed stronger than time, than trauma, than separation. It had guided Theo's inexplicable recognition of her, had preserved Marcus's fractured memories, had given her the strength to keep searching when all seemed lost. As the three of them remained embraced in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the even greater beauty of newfound connection, Lila felt the final pieces of her heart clicking into place. The road ahead wouldn't be entirely smooth. There would be adjustments, explanations, a life to rebuild from scattered fragments. But they would face it together, as a family bound by blood and by a love strong enough to transcend time itself. The truth, finally revealed in its entirety, had set them free to begin again, to build the life they had been denied for 9 long years. And that was all that mattered. Chapter 6. beginning to trust. The transformation of Lila's life happened with breathtaking speed. Within days of the DNA confirmation, Marcus had moved her belongings from the staff quarters to the master suite, much to Mrs. Carver's thinly veiled disapproval and Mrs. Ellis's knowing smiles. The staff adjusted to her new position with varying degrees of acceptance, but Marcus made it abundantly clear through both words and actions that Lila was to be respected as Theo's mother and his partner. "I don't care what anyone thinks," he told her one evening as they lay entwined in their bed, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "You are Theo's mother. You are the woman I love. Everything else is irrelevant." The conviction in his voice, the protective way his arm tightened around her waist, filled Lila with a sense of security she had never known. Yet questions remained, shadows that occasionally darkened her newfound happiness. "Tell me about Sophia," she said softly, feeling him tense at the name of his ex-wife. "Theo mentioned her once, but you never talk about your marriage." Marcus was silent for so long that Lila wondered if he would refuse to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice held a carefully controlled neutrality that told her more than his words. "It was a business arrangement more than a marriage," he admitted, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. "After the accident, I threw myself into work, trying to fill the emptiness I couldn't explain. Sophia was the daughter of my biggest investor, beautiful, sophisticated, appropriate in every way that mattered to my board of directors." His hand found Lila's, intertwining their fingers as if drawing strength from her touch. "We dated for 6 months, became engaged because it seemed the logical next step. I didn't love her. I'm not sure I was capable of love then, with so much of myself missing." "What happened?" Lila prompted gently when he fell silent again. A humorless smile touched Marcus's lips. "Theo happened. Sophia discovered she was pregnant 3 months after our wedding. She'd never wanted children, made that clear from the beginning, but accepted the pregnancy as an inconvenience to be endured." The clinical way he described it made Lila's heart ache. "She never bonded with him, not even after his birth," Marcus confirmed, pain evident in his voice despite his attempt at detachment. "She hired a night nurse immediately, insisted on formula despite the doctor's recommendations for breastfeeding, returned to her social calendar within weeks. Theo was an accessory to her, not a child to be loved." Lila's arms tightened around him instinctively, her maternal heart breaking at the thought of her baby, their baby, treated with such cold indifference. "How did the divorce happen?" "I came home early from a business trip," Marcus said, his jaw tightening at the memory. "Found Theo alone with a new, inexperienced nanny while Sophia was in Europe with her latest lover. She hadn't even told me she was leaving the country." The betrayal in his voice wasn't that of a jealous husband, but of a father whose child had been abandoned. "I filed for divorce the next day, offering a generous settlement in exchange for full custody. She accepted without argument. Seemed relieved, actually, to be freed from the responsibilities of motherhood." "She just walked away from both of you?" Lila couldn't imagine abandoning Theo for anything in the world. Marcus's expression darkened, not quite so cleanly. "Sophia has a particular talent for manipulation and deception. During the proceedings, she attempted to use Theo as leverage for a larger settlement, threatening a custody battle she had no interest in winning, just to extort more money." This new information cast a more sinister light on Sophia's character. "She sounds calculating. Calculatingly cruel," Marcus corrected, his voice hard. "When she realized I would fight her to the last penny for Theo's custody, she changed tactics. Started spreading rumors about my mental fitness, suggesting the accident had left me unstable and prone to delusions. It nearly worked. The board considered forcing me to step down temporarily." Understanding dawned in Lila's mind. This was the root of Marcus's initial suspicion of her, his protective ferocity toward Theo. He had already seen one woman weaponize his son against him. The thought of another claiming him, only to disappoint him, would be unbearable. "I would never abandon him," she whispered, moving to straddle Marcus's hips, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Never. He's part of me, Marcus. The best part." Something in Marcus's expression softened, the shadows receding from his eyes as he reached up to trace her face. "I know," he said simply. "I recognized that from the first moment. Perhaps children sense these things better than adults." Lila leaned down to kiss him, pouring all her love, all her commitment into the connection as passion reignited between them. As their bodies joined in perfect harmony, she silently promised both Marcus and their son that she would spend a lifetime making up for the years they had lost. The next morning, breakfast brought a surprise announcement from Theo. "I don't want to go to boarding school anymore," he declared, pushing his eggs around his plate with unusual concentration. "I want to stay home with you and Mommy." Marcus and Lila exchanged glances across the table. Theo's prestigious private school, where he attended as a day student but would transition to boarding the following year, had been a source of pride for Marcus, secured through connections and an obscene amount of money. "You love Crestwood Academy," Marcus reminded him gently. "Your friends are there, your science club." Theo shook his head with stubborn determination. "I only went because you were sad and worked all the time. Now you're happy and Mommy's here and I want to be home." The simple logic, the raw emotional honesty of a child who had clearly been making accommodations for his father's emotional state, hit Marcus hard. Lila watched understanding dawn in his eyes. How much of Theo's seemingly perfect behavior had been an attempt to protect his father from further pain? "We'll consider other options," Marcus promised, reaching across to squeeze his son's small hand. "Perhaps a day school closer to home, where you can return to us every afternoon." The smile that lit Theo's face was worth any potential educational sacrifice. "Really? And can Mommy help with my homework instead of tutors? She's super smart. She was going to be a nurse." Lila's heart swelled at his unshakable faith in her abilities. "I'd be honored to help with homework," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And maybe we could convert one of the rooms into a proper study space for you, with all your books and science equipment." Theo's enthusiasm for this idea launched him into detailed plans for his dream study space, complete with a telescope, a microscope, and a really big tank for my future pet octopus. Marcus listened with amused indulgence, but Lila noticed the thoughtfulness in his eyes, the way he watched their interaction with wonder. Later, as Theo ran off to prepare for his current school day, Marcus pulled Lila into his arms. "You're changing us," he murmured against her hair. "Both of us, for the better." "We're changing each other," she corrected, nestling against his chest. "Becoming the family we were always meant to be." His arms tightened around her, a silent acknowledgement of the truth in her words. In just days, they had begun the process of healing wounds 9 years in the making. Marcus's guarded heart opening to love, Theo's quiet loneliness giving way to exuberant joy, Lila's aching emptiness filled by the family she had searched for so desperately. They still had challenges to face, explaining their unusual situation to Marcus's business associates, navigating Theo's educational transition, building a life together from such unconventional beginnings, and, perhaps most concerningly, the shadow of Sophia lingered in Lila's mind. A woman that manipulative and vindictive might not stay away forever, especially if she learned that Theo's true mother had entered the picture. But as Lila stood in the circle of Marcus's arms, listening to their son's cheerful humming from the next room, she knew with bone-deep certainty that they would face those challenges together, strengthened by the love that had survived 9 years of separation. The trust between them, once fractured by circumstance and misunderstanding, was growing stronger each day, a foundation for the future they would build together, one precious moment at a time. Chapter 7. Hearts Entwined. 3 weeks after the truth had been revealed, Marcus surprised Lila with an envelope at breakfast, sliding it across the table with studied casualness that couldn't quite hide the anticipation in his eyes. "What's this?" she asked, wiping jam from Theo's chin before accepting the thick, cream-colored paper. "Open it and find out," Marcus replied, his lips twitching with barely suppressed pleasure. Inside was a set of printed boarding passes, 3 first-class tickets to the coast, departing that afternoon. Lila looked up in surprise, finding both Marcus and Theo watching her with identical expressions of excitement. "A family trip to my beach house," Marcus explained, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Just the 3 of us. No staff, no interruptions, no business calls, just family time." "It's our favorite place," Theo added, bouncing in his chair. "There's a private beach, minister and dolphins, and stars at night that look close enough to touch." Lila felt tears gathering in her eyes at the thoughtful gesture. Despite the joy of their reunion, the past weeks had been intense. Staff adjusting to her new position, Marcus organizing Theo's transfer to a prestigious day school, both of them learning to navigate co-parenting after years apart. This trip offered a precious opportunity to simply be together, away from watchful eyes and lingering whispers. "It sounds perfect," she said softly, turning her hand to interlace her fingers with Marcus's. "When do we leave?" "Right after Theo's last class," Marcus replied with a grin that made him look years younger. "Pack for a long weekend. Casual clothes only. The beach house has rules against business suits and formal dresses." The playful side of Marcus, emerging with increasing frequency as their relationship deepened, never failed to delight Lila. This was the man she had glimpsed during that stormy night 9 years ago. Passionate, warm, capable of joy that matched the intensity of his more serious nature. The beach house proved to be a modernist marvel of glass and sustainable wood, perched on a cliff overlooking a pristine private beach. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean, while minimalist furnishings and soothing blues and neutrals created an atmosphere of tranquil luxury. "It's breathtaking," Lila murmured as Marcus led her through the main living area, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Dad built it after his accident," Theo informed her matter-of-factly, already dumping his small backpack on a chair. "He said the ocean helped his headaches go away." Marcus's arm slipped around Lila's waist, drawing her closer. "I came here seeking peace," he admitted quietly, never understanding who I was actually missing. The simple honesty of his statement, the vulnerability in his eyes, made Lila's heart swell with love. Standing on tiptoe, she brushed a kiss across his lips, savoring the way his arms automatically tightened around her. Their moment was interrupted by Theo's dramatic gagging noise from across the room. "Dad, you promised we'd go to the beach before dinner. Stop kissing Mom and let's go." Laughter broke the moment, Marcus's deep chuckle mingling with Lila's lighter tones in a harmony that felt as natural as breathing. "Your son has spoken," Lila teased, poking Marcus's chest playfully. "The kissing will have to wait." The heated promise in Marcus's eyes as he released her sent pleasant shivers down Lila's spine. "Later," he murmured, his voice dropping to a register meant only for her ears. The afternoon passed in a blur of simple joys, building sandcastles with Theo, collecting seashells along the shoreline, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. After a dinner of grilled seafood on the deck, they roasted marshmallows over a small fire pit, while Theo regaled Lila with elaborate stories of past adventures at the beach house. When the boy finally succumbed to exhaustion, eyes drooping despite his valiant efforts to stay awake, Marcus carried him to bed with tender care. Lila followed, watching from the doorway as Marcus tucked the blankets around their son, brushing dark hair, so like his own, from Theo's forehead with gentle fingers. "He's perfect," Marcus said softly as they closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar. "Perfect because he's half you." The words, spoken with such simple certainty, touched Lila deeply. Taking Marcus's hand, she led him back to the deck, where the night air carried the salt tang of the ocean and stars dusted the sky in brilliant profusion. "Dance with me," Marcus said suddenly, pulling her into his arms without waiting for a response. "There's no music," Lila pointed out, though she went willingly, her body melting against his with practiced ease. Marcus smiled, the moonlight silvering his features into something almost otherworldly in its beauty. "We don't need music," he murmured, beginning to sway gently, one hand splayed across her lower back, the other holding hers against his chest. "Just this. Just us." As they moved together beneath the starlit sky, the rhythmic crash of waves providing all the accompaniment they needed, Lila felt a sense of completion that transcended words. This man, this child, this life they were building together, it was everything she had dreamed of during those long, lonely years of separation. "I want to marry you," Marcus said suddenly, stopping their dance to look down at her with an intensity that stole her breath. "What?" she managed, certain she'd misheard. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs gently tracing her cheekbones as if memorizing their contour. "I want to marry you, Lila Stone. Not because of Theo, not because of societal expectations, but because I cannot imagine a single day of my future without you in it." The declaration, spoken with such raw honesty, made tears spring to Lila's eyes. "Marcus, we've only been together for—" 9 years and 3 weeks, he interrupted with a smile that held equal parts tenderness and certainty. "Our bodies were separated, but our souls never were. Theo knew it. Deep down, I think we both knew it too." He kissed her then, a gentle meeting of lips that somehow conveyed more devotion than their most passionate embraces. "I've never believed in soulmates or destiny," he continued, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm a businessman, I deal in facts and probability. But what are the odds that our son would recognize you instantly, that my body would remember yours even when my mind couldn't, that every night for 9 years I'd dream of green eyes without understanding why?" The simple logic, the absolute certainty in his voice, washed away Lila's hesitation like waves erasing footprints on sand. This was Marcus, her Marcus, the man who had captured her heart in a single stormy night and never relinquished it, even across years of separation. "Yes," she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her like an artesian spring. "Yes, I'll marry you." For a heartbeat, Marcus simply stared at her, as if he hadn't truly expected her to agree so readily. Then his face transformed with a smile of such radiant happiness that it nearly stopped Lila's heart. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. In answer, Lila wound her arms around his neck, pulling his mouth down to hers. The kiss began gently, a confirmation of their commitment, but quickly deepened into something more primal. Marcus's arms encircling her waist lifted her clear off her feet. "I don't have a ring," he admitted when they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Marcus keeping her suspended in his embrace, unwilling to let even gravity separate them. "This wasn't planned, at least not for tonight. I'd intended something more elaborate." Lila laughed softly, cradling his beloved face between her palms. "This is perfect," she assured him. "Just us, the ocean, the moonlight. I don't need elaborate, Marcus. I just need you." With a groan that was half desire, half reverence, Marcus reclaimed her mouth, his kiss deeper, more demanding than before. One hand slid beneath the light sundress she wore, finding bare skin that heated instantly under his touch. "Here?" Lila gasped as his lips traveled down her throat. "Here," Marcus confirmed, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers racing along her nerve endings. "Under the stars. Consider it the first of many wedding gifts." Their lovemaking was unhurried yet intense, each touch infused with the promise they'd just exchanged. The night air on bare skin, the occasional splash of seawater reaching their entwined bodies, the canopy of stars above, all combined to create a sensory experience that transcended mere physical pleasure. "Mine," Marcus murmured against her skin as they moved together. "Always mine." "Always," Lila agreed breathlessly, her hands clutching his shoulders as waves of pleasure built within her, mirroring the rhythm of the ocean beside them. When release finally claimed them both, it was with a synchronicity that seemed to underscore the rightness of their union. Two souls, falling together, catching each other, rising as one into something greater than either could achieve alone. Afterward, as they lay tangled together on a beach blanket, Marcus's jacket draped over them, and the warm night air caressing their cooling skin, Lila felt a sense of perfect peace settle over her. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. Lila smiled, nestling closer. "That life has a strange way of coming full circle," she replied. 9 years ago, I pulled a stranger from a burning car, never imagining he would someday be my fiancé." Marcus pressed a kiss to her forehead, his arms tightening around her. "Not a stranger," he corrected gently, "just a soul who hadn't yet recognized its other half." The poetic sentiment, so unexpected from a man who dealt primarily in facts and figures, brought fresh tears to Lila's eyes. "I love you," she whispered, the words feeling simultaneously inadequate and all-encompassing. "And I love you," Marcus replied with absolute certainty, yesterday, today, tomorrow, always. As they lay beneath the endless canopy of stars, the rhythm of the waves a soothing counterpoint to their synchronized heartbeats, Lila knew they could face whatever challenges the future held together. Their hearts entwined as surely as their bodies, their family complete at last. Chapter 8. Twisted Hearts. The engagement ring on Lila's finger, A sapphire surrounded by diamonds that matched her eyes perfectly caught the morning sunlight as she helped Theo with his breakfast. 3 weeks had passed since their magical weekend at the beach house, weeks filled with wedding plans, school transitions, and the everyday joys of family life that Lila had dreamed of for 9 long years. "Mom, can we get a dog after the wedding?" Theo asked, carefully cutting his pancakes into precise triangles, a habit he'd inherited from his father. "Dad always said no because he travels too much, but now you're here to help, and I promise I'll walk it every day." Lila smiled, brushing his dark hair, so like Marcus's, back from his forehead. "We'll discuss it as a family," she promised, "but I think it's a wonderful idea." "Discuss what as a family?" Marcus asked, entering the kitchen in his perfectly tailored suit. Despite his formal business attire, his eyes were warm as he bent to kiss Lila, lingering just long enough to make her heart flutter before dropping a kiss on Theo's head. "A dog," Theo announced excitedly. "Mom thinks it's a good idea." Marcus raised an eyebrow at Lila, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Does she now? Interesting negotiation tactic involving our son before approaching me." "I said we'd discuss it as a family," Lila clarified, though she couldn't help smiling at Marcus's teasing tone. These moments of easy domesticity still felt miraculous after so many years of longing and separation. Marcus's phone buzzed, interrupting their family moment. His expression shifted as he read the message, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a tension Lila had come to recognize as his business face. "Everything okay?" she asked, pouring him coffee as he slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Just work," he replied, but the tightness around his mouth told Lila there was more to it. Before she could press further, Miss Ellis bustled in with the mail, sorting it into neat piles on the counter. "Mr. Harrison, that special package you've been expecting has arrived," she announced, handing him a small box. "And this came by courier for you specifically, Miss Stone." Lila accepted the large envelope with surprise. Few people even knew she was at the Harrison estate, and those who did would call rather than send formal correspondence. The return address, Sophia Langston, the name Marcus's ex-wife had reverted to after their divorce, made her blood run cold. Marcus's sharp intake of breath told her he'd seen it too. "Theo, buddy, you should finish getting ready for school," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "The new uniform is in your closet, remember?" Once Theo had left, Marcus turned to Lila, his expression grave. "Whatever that is, we face it together," he said firmly, taking her hand in his. "Sophia has no power over us or our family." With a deep breath, Lila opened the envelope and withdrew a thick folder containing photographs, financial statements, and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. As she scanned the contents, her hands began to tremble. "What is it?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with concern. Lila handed him the note, her throat too constricted to speak. Marcus's face darkened as he read Sophia's elegant script. "Marcus, darling, how quaint that you've fallen for this elaborate con. Did your lost love mention her strategic research into your finances after discovering her pregnancy? Or her detailed plan to infiltrate your household using your pathetically vulnerable son as leverage? Perhaps she forgot to share how she's been systematically building this scheme for years, waiting for the perfect moment to claim her share of the Harrison fortune. The enclosed evidence should help clear your besotted mind. Do reconsider our discussion about reconciliation. I've always been so much better suited to your world than this calculated gold digger. With concern for your happiness, Sophia." "This is absurd," Marcus said flatly, dropping the note on the table, an obvious attempt to cause trouble. But Lila had been examining the photographs. Screenshots of searches about Marcus's net worth, printouts of forum discussions about paternity rights and inheritance laws. Images clearly altered to suggest she'd been stalking Marcus for years before her arrival at the mansion. "She's trying to make it look like I orchestrated everything," Lila whispered, her voice shaking, "like finding you was some elaborate scheme for money." Marcus's jaw tightened as he examined the so-called evidence. "It's all fabricated," he said firmly. "Sophia excels at manipulation. I warned you about her talents in this area. This won't work." Yet, as he flipped through the documents, Lila saw something flicker in his eyes. Not doubt exactly, but a shadow of the suspicion she'd once seen there when he'd first questioned her connection to Theo vanished almost immediately, replaced by protective anger. but its brief appearance cut Lila to the core. "Marcus," she said softly, placing her hand over his, "if there's any part of you that wonders—" "No!" he interrupted, his voice fierce as he captured her hand. "Not for a second. Sophia is desperate and vindictive. This is exactly her style. She can't stand to see me happy, especially with someone so different from her world." His certainty should have reassured Lila, but the shadow she'd glimpsed lingered in her mind. As Marcus made calls to his legal team, instructing them to address Sophia's pathetic attempt at extortion, Lila found herself examining the carefully crafted evidence. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to create a narrative that painted her as a calculating gold digger, manipulating dates, fabricating internet searches, constructing a false history designed to feed any lingering insecurities Marcus might harbor. That evening, after Theo was asleep, Marcus found Lila in the garden, sitting alone on the stone bench where they often watched the sunset together. His face softened as he sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Edward is handling everything," he assured her, referring to his lawyer and closest friend. "Sophia has no legal ground to stand on. And these ridiculous accusations won't change anything between us." Lila studied his beloved face in the fading light, searching for any trace of the doubt she'd glimpsed earlier. "Are you sure? Earlier when you saw those papers, just for a moment." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of rare vulnerability. "I'd be lying if I said those doctored images didn't strike at old wounds," he admitted quietly. "Sophia's betrayal left scars that are still healing, but Lila," he cupped her face with tender hands, "that momentary reaction was about my past, not our future. Not my trust in you." The honesty in his admission, the vulnerability he was willing to show her, eased some of Lila's fear. Yet something still nagged at her. A sense that Sophia's attack was just beginning, that the peace they'd found might be more fragile than they wanted to believe. "What did she mean about reconciliation?" Lila asked, remembering the note's reference to a previous discussion. "Have you been in contact with her?" A flash of discomfort crossed Marcus's face. "She called last week," he admitted reluctantly. "I didn't mention it because it seemed meaningless. Just Sophia being Sophia, suggesting that Theo needed maternal stability that only she could provide. I shut her down immediately. The revelation that he'd kept this from her, however insignificant it might have seemed, stung more than Lila wanted to admit. "What else haven't you told me?" she asked softly. Marcus tensed slightly, his gaze shifting away for just a moment, long enough for Lila to know there was more. "She's been attempting to contact board members," he finally said, "suggesting that my judgment is compromised, that the company needs stronger leadership during this personal crisis." "It's nothing, Lila. Everyone knows Sophia's tactics." But it wasn't nothing. It was a coordinated attack on the life they were building, on the family they were fighting to protect, and Marcus had chosen to shield her from it, to handle it alone, rather than trusting her as a true partner. "We can't build a marriage on partial truths," Lila said quietly, the hurt in her voice making Marcus flinch. "I spent 9 years searching for you, raising our son alone, fighting for every scrap of information about the man I loved. I'm not fragile, Marcus. I don't need protection from reality." Regret shadowed his features as he took her hands again. "You're right," he acknowledged. "I've spent so long handling everything alone, being the sole protector of Theo and the company. Sharing burdens doesn't come naturally to me yet, but I'm trying, Lila. I want to be the partner you deserve." The sincerity in his voice, the genuine remorse in his eyes softened Lila's hurt. "Then promise me, no more secrets, no matter how small. We face everything together, the good and the bad." "I promise," Marcus said solemnly, lifting her hand to press a kiss to the sapphire ring that symbolized their commitment. "No more secrets." That night, as they made love with a passionate intensity born of nearly losing what they'd found, Lila tried to banish the lingering unease Sophia's attack had planted. Marcus worshipped her body with tender devotion, his every touch, every whispered endearment a counterpoint to the doubts that threatened their happiness. Yet, as dawn approached and Marcus slept peacefully beside her, Lila found herself staring at the ceiling, Sophia's venomous words echoing in her mind, not because they contained any truth, but because they had exposed the fragility of the foundation they were building, a foundation still marred by the scars of past betrayals, still vulnerable to attacks from those who wished them ill. When morning finally arrived, Lila made a decision. If Sophia wanted a fight, she would get one. Not from Marcus alone, but from both of them, united and unbreakable. Because this family, this love they had rediscovered against impossible odds, was worth fighting for with everything they had. She didn't realize, as she watched the sunrise paint the sky in hues of promise, that Sophia's attack was only the opening salvo in a battle that would test their love to its very limits. A battle that would force them to confront not just external threats, but the deepest fears and insecurities they each harbored in the shadowed corners of their hearts. Chapter 9. Fighting for Love. The Harrison Industries annual charity gala transformed the Grand Plaza Hotel into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Lila, radiant in a sapphire gown that matched both her engagement ring and her eyes, stood beside Marcus as they entered the ballroom. Despite her outward composure, anxiety fluttered beneath her ribs. This was her first official appearance as Marcus's fiancée, her formal introduction to a world that had once seemed impossibly distant. "You look breathtaking," Marcus whispered, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Every man here will envy me tonight. And every woman will wonder what you see in the former maid," she countered with a small smile. "Let them wonder," he replied fiercely. "What we have is real. No one can take that from us." The night progressed smoothly until Edward Langley, Marcus's lawyer and closest friend, approached Lila during a quiet moment. "Sophia's here," he murmured, suddenly directing her attention across the room. She wasn't invited. Sophia Langston stood framed in the doorway like an actress awaiting her cue. Breathtakingly beautiful in crimson silk that emphasized her willowy figure. Her calculated gaze swept the room before settling on Marcus with predatory focus. "She can't cause a scene here," Edward assured her. "Too many witnesses. This is just psychological warfare." "Then she'll be disappointed," Lila replied, squaring her shoulders. "I've waited 9 years for Marcus and Theo. I won't be intimidated by theatrical entrances." Moments later, Sophia had maneuvered to Marcus's side, one perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. "I must admit the foundation thrives under your leadership," she was saying as Lila approached, "though the board has concerns about recent distractions." "Sophia," Marcus acknowledged coolly. "I believe you know my fiancée, Lila Stone." Sophia's smile never reached her eyes. "Of course, the mysterious nanny who so fortuitously appeared with a ready-made heir. How convenient." "Not a nanny," Lila corrected gently. "Theo's biological mother, as confirmed by DNA testing. But then, you've already been briefed on those results by your lawyers, haven't you?" Something dangerous flashed in Sophia's eyes. "DNA can be manipulated," she replied dismissively, "as can vulnerable children." And her gaze swept over Marcus. "Men still suffering from trauma-induced memory issues." Before tensions could escalate further, the elegant Mrs. Margaret Whitmore, the society matriarch whose approval was social currency, intercepted them with perfect timing. "Sophia, darling," she said with deceptive warmth, "I had no idea you were on the guest list, especially given your recent actions against the Foundation's chairman." Sophia's composure slipped momentarily. "Margaret, always so direct." "I'm simply concerned about the Foundation's reputation." "How thoughtful," Mrs. Whitmore replied dryly, "though your concern might appear more genuine if you hadn't attempted to redirect 3 major donors to your pet project last week. Now, I believe the Takahashis were hoping to speak with you, Marcus. Sophia and I have some catching up to do." The dismissal was so perfectly executed that even Sophia couldn't protest without appearing petty as Mrs. Whitmore led the fuming ex-wife away. Marcus guided Lila to a quiet alcove. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "I'm fine," Lila assured him. "But Marcus, she's not going to stop. This is just the beginning." His fingers tightened on her waist. "Let her try. We have truth, evidence, allies she can't match." Yet Lila couldn't shake the sense they were facing an adversary more dangerous than either acknowledged, a woman willing to use even Theo as ammunition in her campaign. 3 days later, Lila's premonition proved devastatingly accurate. She was in the garden when Marcus's car came racing up the driveway, gravel sprang beneath screeching tires. One look at his face, white with barely controlled fury, sent ice through her veins. "Sophia happened," he spat, hands clenched into fists. He showed up at Theo's school, claiming custodial rights. When administration refused, she told Theo we'd been lying to him, that you're an imposter taking advantage of my mental confusion, that the DNA test was faked. Horror choked Lila. Where is he? In the car, Marcus replied, visibly struggling to calm himself. He's confused, upset. He kept asking for you. Theo sat in the back seat, his small face tear-streaked, his school uniform rumpled. When he saw Lila, he launched himself from the car into her waiting arms. She said you weren't my real mom, he sobbed against her neck. She said you were tricking Daddy, and that she's my real mom, and that you're going to take all our money and leave us. Fury, unlike anything Lila had ever experienced, surged through her. This attack on their innocent child transformed Sophia from an irritating adversary to a mortal enemy. Listen to me, she said fiercely, kneeling to meet Theo's tearful gaze. I am your mother. By birth, by blood, by choice, and by love. The DNA test proved it scientifically. But you knew it before anyone else, didn't you? You recognized me the moment we met. Theo nodded, hiccuping slightly. I knew you in my heart and in my dreams. She never felt like my mother, even when I was little. Marcus knelt beside them, enfolding both in his strong arms. Sophia is angry and jealous, he explained gently. She left us years ago because she didn't want to be a mother. Now that she sees our happiness, she wants to destroy it. But why? Theo asked, the innocent question cutting to the heart of adult cruelty. Some people can't bear to see others happy, Lila finally said. They want what they can't have, not because they truly desire it, but because they can't stand for anyone else to possess it. Theo considered this with surprising maturity. She's not going to win, he declared with determination. We won't let her. No, we won't, Marcus agreed, meeting Lila's gaze over their son's head. Sophia's attack on Theo had transformed a social annoyance into a declaration of war. That evening, after Theo had finally fallen asleep, Marcus and Lila met with Edward in the study, strategy replacing emotion. We need a restraining order, Edward advised. Sophia's attempt to remove Theo from school gives us grounds. We should also accelerate the wedding. Once you're legally married, Lila's position as Theo's mother substantially strengthens our case. What about the company angle? Marcus asked. She's been suggesting to board members that I'm mentally unfit for leadership due to trauma-induced delusions about Lila and Theo. By exposing her true motives? Edward replied. My investigation shows she's nearly bankrupt. 3 failed ventures, excessive spending, bad investments. She's desperate for cash, explaining the sudden interest in reconciliation and Theo's welfare. We need to go public, Lila said, clarity dawning. Not with accusations, but with our story. The full truth about how we met, separated, how Theo recognized me despite never having seen me before. Expose our private history to public scrutiny? Marcus questioned. That feels like giving Sophia exactly what she wants. No, Lila insisted. What Sophia wants is shadows, doubts, secrets she can manipulate. Our greatest weapon is the truth. A truth so extraordinary that no one could hear it and believe her poisonous version. Edward nodded. The romance would capture public imagination, generate sympathy. Sophia would appear as the bitter ex trying to destroy a genuine love story. Marcus remained silent, weighing privacy against protecting their family. Finally, he squeezed Lila's hand. We tell our story, the whole truth, on our terms. Not for Sophia, not for the board, but for Theo, for the family we fought so hard to build. The plan took shape quickly, an exclusive interview with a respected journalist accompanied by irrefutable evidence. Medical records from the accident, DNA results, even the photograph that had been Marcus's only connection to Lila during their years apart. As midnight approached, strategies in place and battle lines drawn, Lila and Marcus sought the refuge of their bedroom. Physical and emotional exhaustion consumed them both, yet as they held each other in the darkness, a different kind of intimacy enveloped them. The bone-deep connection of partners united against a common enemy, of lovers whose bond had been tested and found unbreakable. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. Never wanted to expose you to this ugliness. Don't apologize for Sophia's actions, Lila replied fiercely. This fight isn't your burden alone anymore. It's ours, and we will win, Marcus, not just for ourselves, but for Theo. The raw vulnerability in his eyes as he traced her features in the moonlight made her heart ache with love. "I don't deserve you," he murmured, "but I will spend every day of our lives trying to be worthy of the gift you've given me." "What gift?" she asked softly. "The gift of wholeness," he answered simply. "Before you, I was half a man, successful, wealthy, but incomplete. You and Theo, you make me whole." Their lovemaking that night transcended physical pleasure, becoming a sacred affirmation of their bond. Each touch, each whispered endearment became a vow more binding than any legal document. In the sanctuary of their bedroom, they reclaimed what Sophia had tried to tarnish: the pure, unbreakable connection between two souls who had found each other across impossible odds. The interview strategy worked beyond expectations. Their extraordinary love story captured public imagination, generating overwhelming support. Sophia's machinations crumbled in the face of irrefutable evidence and the palpable authenticity of their connection. The final blow came when Sophia's former assistant revealed evidence of her fabrications and financial desperation. Faced with potential legal consequences and the complete failure of her schemes, Sophia retreated to Europe. The Harrison Industries Board expressed their unwavering support for Marcus Harrison and his family during this joyous time of reunion. With Sophia's shadow finally lifted, they turned their full attention to the December wedding that would mark not the beginning of their love story, but the triumphant continuation of a connection that had defied time, trauma, and deliberate sabotage to emerge stronger than ever. As the first snow of winter transformed the estate into a crystalline wonderland, Leela stood at their bedroom window, watching Theo build a snowman below. Marcus's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" he murmured, his breath warm against her neck. "Beyond words," she replied, leaning into his strength. "I never imagined we could find such perfect peace." Marcus turned her in his arms, his expression infinitely tender as he brushed snowflakes from her hair. "This is just the beginning," he promised softly. "The best is yet to come." Chapter 10. Love Conquers All. Snow fell in gentle spirals outside the Harrison Estates Conservatory, transforming the December landscape into a winter wonderland that seemed conjured from a fairy tale. Inside, thousands of white roses and twinkling lights created an enchanted forest effect that made the glass-enclosed space feel like a realm between worlds, a perfect setting for a love story that had defied time and memory to reach this perfect culmination. Lila stood before the mirror in what had once been a guest suite, her reflection almost unrecognizable, not because of the exquisite ivory gown that hugged her curves before flowing into a delicate train, but because of the luminous joy that transformed her features into something transcendent. Gone was the haunted look of longing that had shadowed her eyes for 9 years. In its place shone a happiness so complete it seemed to glow from within. "You look like an angel," came Theo's voice from the doorway. He stood in his miniature tuxedo, looking so much like a smaller version of Marcus that Lila's heart clenched with love for them both. "The most beautiful angel I've ever seen," added Mrs. Ellis, entering behind Theo with uncharacteristic tears glistening in her eyes. "Mr. Harrison asked me to bring you this." She handed Lila a cream-colored envelope bearing Marcus's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a note written in his bold, confident script. "My dearest Lila, 9 years ago you pulled me from flames and into your life, giving me a night of perfection I couldn't remember but never truly forgot. Today I stand ready to offer you forever in return. Not because you saved my life, not because you gave me our beautiful son, but because loving you is as essential to me as breathing. Every heartbeat carries your name, every dream holds your face. When you walk down the aisle to me today, know that you're walking to a man who will spend eternity cherishing the miracle that brought you back to me across impossible odds. With all that I am, Marcus." Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks as she pressed the letter to her heart. Mrs. Ellis discreetly handed her a handkerchief, while Theo watched with solemn understanding beyond his years. "Dad cried when he wrote that," Theo informed her matter-of-factly. "He didn't know I saw, but he did. And he asked me to give you this, too." From his pocket, Theo produced a small velvet box. Inside nestled an antique emerald pendant on a delicate platinum chain, the stones exactly matching the green of Lila and Theo's eyes. "It was great-grandmother Harrison's," Theo explained, as Lila gasped. "Dad said she made him promise it would only be worn by his true love on their wedding day. He kept it all these years without knowing who it was waiting for." With reverent care, Theo fastened the pendant around Lila's neck, the weight of family history and future promise settling against her skin like a blessing. "Now you're really part of us," Theo declared with absolute certainty, "forever and always." The music that drifted up from the conservatory below wasn't the traditional wedding march, but a hauntingly beautiful arrangement of the lullaby Lila had sung to Theo on the stormy night when Marcus's memories had begun to return. Taking Theo's outstretched hand, Lila descended the grand staircase, each step carrying her closer to the future she had dreamed of for so long. The gathered guests, a select group of those who had supported their extraordinary journey, rose as Lila appeared at the entrance to the conservatory. But she saw none of them. Her gaze locked immediately with Marcus's, standing tall and impossibly handsome at the end of the petal-strewn aisle. The naked emotion on his face, wonder, devotion, and bone-deep love, stole her breath more effectively than any corset could have done. With Theo's small hand warm in hers, Lila moved toward Marcus in a dreamlike state, tears of joy blurring her vision. When they reached him, Theo placed her hand in his father's with ceremonial gravity before moving to stand between them, completing their family circle as the officiant began the ceremony. They had written their own vows, traditional words seeming inadequate for the extraordinary path that had led them here. "Lila," Marcus began, his deep voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "I stand before you today, not as the man who forgot, but as the man who found his way back to you. Despite every obstacle fate placed between us, you saved me twice. First from fire, then from a life half-lived without the love you awakened in me. I vow to cherish every moment of our shared future, to honor the miracle of our connection, to be the husband and father our family deserves. My heart recognized yours before my mind remembered your face. Proof that some bonds transcend memory itself. I am yours, completely, irrevocably, eternally." Tears flowed freely down Lila's cheeks as she spoke her answering vows, her voice clear despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Marcus, 9 years ago, a storm brought us together for a night that changed everything. When dawn separated us, I carried you with me, in my heart, in my dreams, in our beautiful son. Finding you again felt like finding the missing piece of my soul, the completion of a circle destiny had momentarily broken. I vowed to stand by you through whatever storms life brings, to love you with the same certainty that guided me back to you, to build with you the family we were always meant to be. Some souls are bound by ties stronger than time or circumstance, and ours will remain entwined in this life and beyond." As they exchange rings, Lila's a platinum band studded with tiny sapphires that matched her engagement ring, Marcus's engraved with their initials and the date of that first fateful night. Theo beamed between them, the physical embodiment of their love. "By the power vested in me," the officiant concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Marcus didn't wait for permission to kiss his bride. He gathered Lila into his arms with passionate intensity, his lips claiming hers in a kiss that spoke of promises kept and pleasures to come. The conservatory erupted in applause, but for Lila and Marcus, the world had narrowed to just the three of them. Husband, wife, and the child, who had somehow known what neither of them could remember. The celebration that followed was intimate yet joyous. Close friends and loyal staff united in celebration of a love that had overcome every obstacle in its path. As their first dance ended, Marcus kept Lila close in his arms, reluctant to release her even as other couples joined them on the dance floor. "Happy?" he murmured against her temple, his breath warm against her skin. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she replied, nestling closer against the solid strength of his chest. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover this has all been a beautiful dream." "Not a dream," Marcus promised, his voice dropping to the register that never failed to send delicious shivers down her spine. "And I intend to spend tonight and every night for the rest of our lives proving just how real this is." The heat in his eyes made promises that set Lila's blood aflame, but before she could respond, Theo appeared beside them, practically vibrating with excitement. "Can we tell them now?" he pleaded, bouncing on his toes. "Please, it's killing me to keep the secret." Marcus laughed, the sound rich with happiness, as he nodded to the band to pause their music. With one arm firmly around Lila's waist and the other drawing Theo before them, he addressed their gathered loved ones. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying easily through the conservatory. "Family, because that's what each of you has become through your support. Lila and I have an announcement, one that Theo has been guarding with remarkable restraint these past 2 weeks. With a theatrical flourish worthy of his father, Theo proclaimed to the hushed gathering, 'I'm going to be a big brother in summer. Mom says the baby was made from so much love that it couldn't help but happen.' As delighted congratulations surrounded them, Marcus drew Lila into the shelter of his arms, his hand moving protectively to cover her still flat stomach, where their second miracle grew. "He's exactly right," he whispered against her ear, his voice rough with emotion. "This child, like Thea, was created from a love powerful enough to overcome even time itself." Later, as the celebration continued around them, Marcus led Lila to a quiet corner of the conservatory, his expression holding a hint of boyish excitement she had come to cherish. "I have one more wedding gift for you," he said, pressing a key into her palm. "I've purchased the cottage where we first met, where you pulled me from the fire, where Theo was conceived. I've had it restored exactly as it was that night, with just one addition." "What addition?" Lila asked, her heart swelling with love for this man who understood so perfectly what would mean most to her. "A nursery," he said softly, his hands framing her face with tender reverence. "For our growing family. I thought our children should know where their story began, where two souls found each other against impossible odds." Words failed Lila completely. Instead, she rose on her toes to press her lips to his, pouring all her love, all her gratitude into a kiss that quickly deepened into something more primal, more urgent. Only the knowledge of their guests nearby prevented them from being completely lost in each other. "Tonight," Marcus promised against her lips, his eyes dark with desire, "tonight, I'll show you exactly how much I love you." "And every night after," Lila whispered back, her body already responding to the promise in his gaze. As midnight approached and the celebration began to wind down, Lila stood with Marcus beside the sleeping form of their son, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion on a cushioned window seat. In peaceful slumber, Theo's face reflected the perfect blending of their features. Marcus's strong jaw and aristocratic nose, Lila's emerald eyes and expressive mouth. "Look at what we created," Marcus said softly, his arm warm around Lila's waist. "Look at what almost never was, if not for your courage in finding us again." "It was always meant to be," Lila replied with quiet certainty. "Some connections are written in the stars, Marcus. Ours just took a more winding path than most." As if confirming her words, a shooting star streaked across the winter sky beyond the glass walls of the conservatory, a fleeting streak of brilliance against the darkness. Marcus's arms tightened around her, his lips finding the sensitive spot behind her ear that never failed to make her melt against him. "Shall we put our son to bed?" he murmured, his voice a seductive caress, "and begin our wedding night properly? I've waited 9 years to make love to my wife." The way he said wife, with possessive pride and heated promise, sent anticipation curling through Lila's body. As they carried their sleeping son to his room, as they bid farewell to the last lingering guests, a sense of perfect rightness settled over her. This was what completion felt like, this certainty, this belonging, this absolute knowledge of being precisely where she was meant to be. Later, in the privacy of their bedroom, surrounded by hundreds of candles that transformed their space into a sanctuary of golden light, Marcus made good on every unspoken promise. Their lovemaking transcended mere physical pleasure, becoming instead a communion of souls, finally completely united. "Mine," Marcus whispered against her skin as they moved together in perfect harmony. "Forever mine." "Yours," Lila agreed breathlessly, her hands mapping the contours of the body she would spend a lifetime cherishing. "Always yours." When dawn painted the winter sky in delicate hues of pink and gold, they lay entwined, reluctant to break contact even in sleep. Marcus's hand rested protectively over the place where their second child grew, while Lila's head nestled in the hollow of his shoulder, as if shaped specifically for that purpose. As Lila drifted in that peaceful space between slumber and waking, she felt gratitude so profound it brought fresh tears to her eyes. 9 years of separation, of longing, of raising her child alone while believing the man she loved would never remember her, all leading to this perfect moment of completion. Their extraordinary journey had only just begun. There would be more children to love, more memories to create, more challenges to face together. But with the unbreakable foundation of a love strong enough to overcome amnesia, separation, and deliberate sabotage, Lila knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever truly separate them again. Some souls, after all, were simply destined to find each other in this life and beyond.